Hey y'all, Fairy Den Exotics here. So I was on my Facebook a little while ago and I was scrolling around and there was a question from someone on one of the groups I'm in for garter snakes and whatnot about a wild garter snake that he was given, that he has never raised garter snakes before, so he really didn't have any information. So he posted to this group looking for help, and there were a lot of people with comments that were really great and really helpful. Things like how to, what fish contain thimonase and how to feed them, how to switch the snake over to a mammal diet, and all sorts of other things. Most of these comments were really helpful, but there was one particular comment, and it is the reason I'm doing the video today. And I'm not saying anything bad about this person at all in any way, shape, or form. I'm making this video because for the last few months, I've noticed a large increase in people who own fish and frog eating snakes like water snakes and garter snakes. And I've also noticed a lot of incorrect information floating around. So as a breeder, as a keeper, as a lover of snakes and garter snakes and water snakes specifically, and as someone who is basically, it's part of our mission for Fairy Den is to help bring the best care to animals that we possibly can through what we do, in showing it, and through teaching people who are, obtaining animals from us, or even just through helping people who ask questions and we have the answers to. The whole goal of it is to make the experience of life for the animals better, and thus for the keeper better. Now, the actual comment itself was that this person owns a wild garter snake, and that they have had this garter snake for a while due to an accident, and they just decided to keep it because it was injured, and it did okay in captivity. The issue I have is not that the animal was wild or any of those things, none of those things at all. The issue that I have is that this person then shares their feeding schedule of this snake with the rest of the group. And the feeding schedule is mammals and worms every 2 to 3 days. Now here's the thing about garter snakes and water snakes. They have an extremely high metabolism. We're talking animals that eat every 2 to 3 days, 5 to 6 thumb-sized fish at a time, and we're talking about garter snakes specifically right now. If you feed them mammals, which you can, you have to change their feeding schedule to once a week instead of every 2 to 3 days. This is really important, you guys. The reason that you have to change this feeding schedule is because mammals contain a lot more fat and protein in them than fish. And more importantly, the fat. The fat is what we're focusing on. Because if you feed your garter snakes and your water snakes mice or chopped up mice or whatever, and you feed them more than once a week, those mice, they're going to be obese. They're going to be extremely uncomfortable, and their lifespans are going to be shortened by a very long time. We're talking a couple of years, like maybe 3 or 4 or 5, we don't know. Depending on how obese the snake is, it could be half their lifespan gone. The main reason that we don't know how long garter snakes live in captivity is because people have been feeding them a mouse diet, and it has taken this long to figure out that they require a longer feeding gap when they're on a mouse diet. So what you want to be feeding your garter snakes, if you can, is frog sausage. There is frog sausage out there. There are a number of reptile feeder websites and places that make it, that you can buy it from. Garters Done Right actually has a post on Facebook about the frog sausage and gives you an idea of where he gets his from and where you can get some from. So I would go check them out. Garters Done Right. Brett Dunn is extremely intelligent. He gives a lot of love to his animals. He is a wonderful breeder to work with. He is very, very knowledgeable. And he works, he will feed his garter snakes, pinkies and stuff like that, but he does it on the correct time schedule, on the correct time frame that is appropriate for the snake's metabolism and their body. A couple of other things that you could feed your garter snakes at home are guppies, because they do not contain thimonase. platies, and mollies. All three of these fish can actually be found at the pet store, at your local pet store, any local pet store. I recommend treating any fish that you bring into the home live to feed to your snakes, even if they come from the store or from a breeder. I recommend treating them with the aquarium salt to get rid of parasites or anything like that, so that your snakes don't get sick. But you can also give them feeder frogs that you can purchase, or if you buy stock pond amounts of tadpoles, like bullfrog tadpoles, they will eat those. You can also feed them bluegills, baby bluegills, or bass minnows or crappie minnows from the local bait shop, your local bait shop. And then when we're talking about babies, you can feed them teeny tiny baby fish. Again, from those varieties that I talked about. You can also feed them worms, red worms, or night crawlers from your local bait store, also safe to feed them. And then finally, the last thing that you can give them is frozen thawed fish from the store, but you're gonna wanna make sure that you put a calcium powder on that, because they're frozen thawed. So they don't contain all the bones and everything else that a whole fish will. So they're not getting all the things that they need with just a piece of fish without the calcium powder and whatnot. So now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with feeding your fish eaters mammals, but you do have to space out their feedings more. You can't give them, mice every 2 to 3 days. It's got to be once a week. And now, if you're feeding them fish and frogs or worms, depending on the size and age of your snake, then you're good. You feed them on the diet, on the schedule that they are supposed to be on, which is every 2 to 3 days, depending on the snake. Now, if we're talking little tiny babies, we're meaning to feed them every day. That's what we're meaning to do. With our water snakes, with our garter snakes. If we're talking newborn babies, then they need to be fed every single day. And they don't need to be fed a lot, but they need to be offered food every single day, especially water snakes. A lot of this information isn't out there. It doesn't just float around willy-nilly. So you have to go looking for it. And the hard part is that as a breeder, as a keeper, it took a lot of experience for me to figure this information out, because it wasn't just out there for me to find. I had to own a few snakes. I had to lose a couple snakes. I had to do things the wrong way once or twice. And I'm sure I am not the only breeder out there who has been in this position. So anyway, I just thought that it might be helpful to share that information. If you are feeding your garter snakes once a week, mammals, that's perfectly fine. If you are feeding them mammals more frequently than once a week, you are making your snake fat, and you are going to shorten their lifespan by quite a lot. So remember that higher fat content for garter snakes and water snakes equals more time between feedings. Lower fat content, aka fish, frogs, tadpoles, or worms, that equals smaller amount of times between feedings. That's important. Another really important thing, again, to touch on is parasites. No wild food for your snakes, even if they were wild caught. You are going to get nematodes, you are going to get hookworms, you're going to get roundworms, you are going to get parasites in your snakes, things that are very uncomfortable that will eventually cause death. Again, also, do not forget that these snakes require thiamine. Thiamine deficiency will cause a severe neurological issue in the snake that does eventually cause death if not treated. And the only way to treat thiamine deficiency is by vitamin B. So these are just things that I was seeing. I've been seeing them a lot in the community, and I really thought it was important to touch on it because I really don't see a whole lot of content creators as breeders or keepers or lovers of reptiles that are sharing this information. And I thought that it was, to me, the most important thing is that our animals live long, happy, healthy lives. And this information is the way for your snake, your fish or frog eating snake, to live a long, happy, healthy life. So I hope this video was educational and helpful. And I hope that you guys learned something new and, that you enjoyed it. But either way, Buried and Exotics out, y'all.